Hi, everyone. Sorry, thanks so much for sticking around and jumping from one level of this discussion to the next with our Indigenous content discoverability in the age of media abundance, what we all need to know. And we all don't have the answer, but I think the idea is through this kind of panel, but kind of one that we really want to engage you with, your own projects and what you found success with in terms of reaching your audience and who is your audience that we heard in that last panel really still continues with, moving up in the next level of your production. So I'm Daniel Northway-Frank. I'm the Industry Series Director here, and I want to thank Bell Media Harold Greenberg Fund, who's our Industry Series lead sponsor. And I want to thank all of our esteemed artists and industry participants for giving your time and energy for pre-panel discussions and to make this as valuable for all of our attendees here. I wanted also to thank the Canada Media Fund for supporting our projects, and I want to give Valerie Creighton, President and CEO of the CMF, to come and give some opening remarks. Thank you so much for coming, Valerie.
I'm not going to bore you, I promise. So everybody having a good time? Yes, isn't this just the best festival in the country, if not the world? Let's give Daniel and his team a fantastic round of applause. And I'm standing right in front of you, I'm sorry. So I was supposed to be on this panel, and I thought what I would have to add would be really boring because you have these fantastic people that are going to talk to you about this issue. So I just wanted to welcome you. Thank you for coming. I hope you're all doing great work and you meet lots of people and have new partnerships. We're thrilled at the Canada Media Fund that we invest. I just checked, last year it was $13.8 million in Indigenous content through our programs, and we're just delighted that some of the great success stories coming out of Canada are reaching the world. So thanks, Daniel. You guys do a great job. Mark Ouimet is going to be the moderator for this panel, so I'm looking forward to hearing a bit. I have to sneak out a bit early, but thank you. You guys have a good time. Make them laugh, make them applaud for you, and it'll all be good. Okay, over to you, Mark.
Good morning. There we go. Morning, everyone. Like Valerie said, I hope you've all been having a great time at the festival. This is my first time at the festival, my first time on any kind of a panel here, so it's very exciting for me. I would like to just briefly introduce myself. My name is Mark Ouimet. I work with Resolution Pictures and Minority Media in Montreal. We are a film and television production company. As most people know who know Resolution Pictures, we've been around since 2001. We have recently opened up our business to video games, to virtual reality, and collaborating all of those companies together. So I work with media outreach for the most part, social media, media relations. I'm sort of involved in all the aspects, bringing them all together and helping them communicate and work together to get our product out there. So we have a really great advantage in my company in that we are sort of our own little media empire, as it were. We have the ability to use the resources from every different point of company, and we can experiment within all of that to allow ourselves to find new ways to get our product out there, to engage audiences, and to really just bring in various parts of those audiences and introducing new content to them and getting them involved basically in everything that we do. So, I mean, I'll come back later, a little bit later on with some of the stuff that we're doing, but I'll just briefly introduce everybody who's here. Unfortunately, my panel partner, Zena Cohen, who is supposed to be here from Resolution, talking about our newest endeavor, Wyatt Magazine, is unable to be here today, so I'll be talking about that a little bit later. As well, on our panel today, we've got next to me, Anusha Dure from NITV, in charge of acquisitions. Next to her, sorry, my notes are a little bit everywhere. Zach Fieldberg from the CBC. He's in charge of production digital originals. Down the line as well, we've got, sorry. And I've lost it. And there it is. Sajid Qureshi, there we go. Co-founder of Showbiz. And recent additions to the panel as of yesterday. We have, sorry, I know we just met. Morgan Waru and Jessica, if I butcher anybody's names, I apologize. Jessica Hansel. and they are the producer and director of Aurora Bridge. Close, sorry. All right. So I guess first we'll start down the line with Sajid.
Hi, my name's Saj Qureshi. I'm the CEO of Showbusy. And what our business is that we work heavily out of Hollywood, but what we did was we took the pain points of content being fragmented online and unified it into vehicles. So in the simplest application of it, that when, let's say, a studio puts out a trailer, what is the probability that that fan or that viewer is going to go engage with, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, e-commerce, or go deeper down that rabbit hole of the story you're trying to tell? So our vehicle is very much about giving the control of the narrative to the storyteller, to the content creator, to be able to dictate how they're going to engage their fan at best, whatever their mandate may be, whether to watch their content, buy product, whether it's advertising as well.
Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, okay.
Just
All right.
A little intro.
Sure. So I'm Zach Feldberg, and I work at CBC in digital originals, which, I think that title in general is something that means different things to different organizations and to different people. So I think it's relevant for us right now, and that, I think CBC was, made an early bid in digital, maybe 20 odd years ago with news, and I think, led the way in that regard. And I think since then, over the years, you've seen, a bit of a fork in the road in terms of the audience that we were getting to the digital platforms, which have been consistently maturing and evolving, and the audience that we get on air. So, I think the role that I play there really reflects that recognition that we're dealing with two different audiences in a sense, and that we need to program differently for those two different audiences. So, what you've seen CBC do online is start to break into content verticals to try to address, what we believe to be the main audience interests that we think we can really tackle and do a good job at tackling. So things like CBC Comedy, CBC Arts, the short docs that we're doing online, and some of my colleagues here from that team in the back, Leslie Burchard and Sandra Kleinfeld. Kids and lifestyle, and some of those things that, again, we think CBC can really offer something special to the audience in a way that, exists online and doesn't necessarily ever go to TV, and that's okay, and that's where it'll find its biggest audience. So that's a bit about what I do. Yeah.
Hi, so I am Acquisitions Manager for National Indigenous Television in Australia. So we are one of 3 public broadcasters in Australia, and basically I am a buyer of content for broadcast and pure VOD and also catch-up VOD.
Great. Jen?
Kia ora everybody, my name is Jessica Hansel. I'm the writer and director of a web series in New Zealand called Aroha Bridge. It's a cartoon of 6 5-minute series in the 2nd season, which back home has got following and is being broadcast on Māori television. So our experience being here with this particular project is kind of talking about how we gained our kind of leverage and our audience with the key demographic that we went after through animation and alternative kind of underground animation too, which was Māori youth, and just focusing on Indigenous kind of contemporary art audiences as well. So yeah, my background was in music, art and comics back home, but now it's kind of Māori and Indigenous driven screenwriting seems to be my jam because I'm here talking now. This is Morgan, the producer.
Hi, hello everybody. I worked with Jess on Aroha Bridge, and I also work with Piki Films in general. Piki Films is a recently established production house in New Zealand. The most popular film was Hunt for the Wilder People, which did really well globally. Directed by Taika, who's an Indigenous filmmaker back home as well. So I'm just sort of working across Piki's development slate at the moment, and recently enjoyed success with the web series Aroha Bridge. Yeah.
Great. I guess a great topic to start off with would be...
Mark, sorry. We actually, Jenny Hayden's here from Shorts. I'm sorry. Not a last minute addition, just a
Here we are.
Hi, I'm Jenny Hayden. I am an acquisition executive with Shorts TV, which is old media. It is a 24/7 linear pay television network. So we don't stream, we don't have on demand. It is, you know, you have to subscribe and then you have to watch according to our schedule. Now, of course, things are changing, and we are doing cross-promotional and making content available online as well. But we are in that growth trajectory where, you know, the transition in how people consume media is impacting our deployment and causing us growth and growth pains as well. And so I come at it from a slightly different perspective than many of the people, having not had my toes in the digital world as many of these people have, with a depth of experience, but obviously needing to be relevant. Our channel is expanding and going in that area. So that's kind of the perspective I'm bringing to the panel.
Great, great. So I think a great topic to open up with would be, as Jenny just mentioned, cross-platform, getting your product out there in as many ways as you possibly can. And that really relates as well to knowing your audience, which these ladies here can talk about. I as well come from a place with Mohawk Girls, which our company produces right now, is one of the bigger shows in Indigenous television right now. It's doing really, really well. And a really big reason for that is because we are outreaching to the entire Indigenous community, the entire community at large, through various social media campaigns, through year-round audience engagement. We constantly are posting new things. We are constantly responding to people who are talking to us, not just during the broadcast or pre-production or any of that, like keeping it going for the whole year, supplying little bits of new content here and there. As well, we have a new initiative we started in season 3, which is called the Second Screen Experience, which is something that is taking off quite a bit for a lot of productions, where you have a companion piece to the actual series you're watching that you can watch on a second screen, a tablet, a phone, your computer if you want. You follow along with the show, and you're given exclusive content. You're given quizzes, you're given things to interact. It's real audience engagement as the show is broadcasting, which ensures, in a way, that you have an audience viewing your show because they want to see and interact along with the show along the way. Thirdly, I suppose, I mean, I'll branch off a little bit as well, Wyatt Magazine, which is an offshoot of our show, Working It Out Together, which in the past season has gone through a retooling to be more of a reality series that focuses on Indigenous people, their issues, and ways to surmount and get around issues that people are dealing with in our communities. And Wyatt Magazine is an offshoot of that. It's an online magazine completely, and we outreach to Indigenous people, Indigenous artists all over the world. Right now it's mostly North America, but we are reaching out to Australia, we are reaching out to Europe, for people with unique stories, unique perspectives. We have a section there called the Screening Room, which we are using to showcase little scene films that are done by Indigenous artists, people who need more exposure, people who want to get their product out there, and we can help them do that. So we're really immersing ourselves right now in all of the social media, digital media, everything we possibly can. I will move on from that, and I'll pass it over to the ladies here so they can discuss their experiences with discoverability for their audience.
Yeah, I'm a Māori and German Samoan person, and I'm living in New Zealand, kind of coming up as a young multicultural person and a creative person. We don't have much of an animation canon in Aotearoa. We kind of like every 10, 20 years somebody will drop a banger, and then we'll ride off that for a couple of decades until someone else can afford to make another one. And I'm a huge animation fan. Like, that was pretty much all I watched. And I started to kind of combine my frustrations with the self-image of Māori that was constantly being presented to our young people it was quite monolithic. And yeah, it was kind of the ideal Māori. And if you were kind of got away from that in any capacity. It was, it was kind of just, it was my way of trying to provide an image for myself when I was younger, like a complex, paradox, hypocrisy-riddled urban Māori person. And so we kind of crafted a couple of seasons of this web series based on a brother and a sister. They're twins called Kōwhai and Monty Hook, and they're in a underground, very, very underground band called Hookups. And it was based on kind of my time in New Zealand, being a musician, and just how I was always smothered by family in a very small kind of environment, and just the hijinks, wacky reality of that, and kind of politically intersecting that with my experience as a multicultural person in a colony. So we kind of, the second season, which was 6 5-minute episodes that we rolled out this year, the kind of focus for us was to reach young animated underground fans of animation, of course, but it was also to reach young people who basically want to see, cool young Māori characters dealing with actual issues, not this respectability politics kind of stuff that we're always at the mercy of. So, we dropped that earlier this year, and it ended up getting quite a big following on social media, on Facebook in particular, and then it was broadcast kind of vignette style in between television programs on Māori television. And I think maybe I should pass it to Morgan because she's a bit brainier with that kind of stuff.
I think part of what Jess was saying is that we recognised that there was a huge gap in the market for representation of Māori youth. It was just really quite generic, and there wasn't even much positive stuff out there, and it wasn't interesting or funny or reflective really of the young urban Māori community. And so Jess came up with these really great stories, and we had a amazing animation team who worked really hard on it. And then when we came to sort of putting it out there, we had a huge plan really to make sure that we were putting it in front of the people that we wanted to see it. And part of that was thinking about how we would utilise traditional media, and part of that was how we would utilise new media, so that's social media and stuff like that. And I think utilising both really worked quite well. It wasn't, if we'd gone one way or the other, it wouldn't have worked. Because you need to use traditional media to be part of the conversation. So we had interviews on the radio, we had interviews in the magazines, the synopsis in the paper, stuff like that's traditional rollout, really. And so then we had sort of authenticity to be having a conversation about the show on social media. If we'd just sort of gone with, then it got picked up really well on social media. I think it's only been out for like 2 months, and it's got about 200,000 views. So hopefully that'll keep growing. But for New Zealand, that's like quite a success for a young Indigenous cartoon.
It's in particular, it's kind of just the very specific tailored response that we got from the exact audience that we wanted, which is, urban and rural young Māori people kind of, saying this is my shit. And so that was kind of the goal. And it was also because I wanted to create a story where the mother is white and she wants to be Māori, and the father is Māori and he wants to be white. And there's a radical uncle who refuses to speak English because he doesn't want to acknowledge the government or colonisation at all. He wants to live in pre-colonial times. And it's just all of these kind of alternative archetypes of Māoridom, which are actually what a lot of Māori families are like. You always have the radical uncle who's like, stay woke, don't listen to them, and you always have kind of, all of these different things where people are internalising and externalising and expressing their Māoridom in ways that you wouldn't predict. So I think that's why it resonated with a lot of young Māori people, because we're constantly being presented with this idea of performing your Māoriness in this perfect way. And I just wanted to basically present there's no perfect way to be an Indigenous person, you know, and any way that you are is ideal. So it just was about, for me, creating content that I knew would resonate and would kind of be universal, because a lot of other Indigenous audiences see it and it's the same stuff. And when I'm here talking to other, you know, Indigenous makers, it's just a telepathic understanding half the time, you know, which I love. Don't have to qualify or justify a lot of the creative decisions that we've made, and that goes into our social media strategies as well. Wanted to have authenticity and discourse with our audience in a way where we could be real and, you know, have our actual sense of humour. But yeah, involve traditional media so that they could approach it like it's an actual show. So that's how it got framed. So then when it actually got approached by traditional media to be on Māori TV, it wasn't, you know, a surprise, because that is like one of the outcomes that we were aiming for. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's amazing. Maybe we can turn it over to Anusha, and you can discuss maybe what you look for in terms of new content and acquiring that content, and how you and your network are looking at new media ways to get that out there as well.
Sure. So we are multi-platform. It's a brave new world, and it's a freight train. So 2 years ago, for instance, when I would acquire content, we would pick and choose what we actually wanted to purchase, what we'd put in the contract that would be catch up on demand. Now it's a staple. So anything I acquire, we require catch up on demand. And now we're in kind of this whole new world of just acquiring just pure VOD, which I think's fantastic for Indigenous filmmakers. So in ITV, we only purchase Indigenous content, well, very vast majority. So I think it's fantastic for our industry. And when we now look at services commissioning, I think this is very exciting as well for Indigenous industry. I think that while it's exciting, because a lot of these companies are brave, they're very interested in Indigenous stories and storytelling, they also kind of don't know what it is, or I guess kind of, and so because they don't know what it is, they can't value it. So I think that's number one, is problematic. I think the other issue with pure VOD and those kind of providers is the just trying to search it. So anyone who's worked on it, you know, trying to find something that you're actually looking for is hard. So I think that's an issue for us, you know, especially because a lot of us use language in our titles. So I think, you know, that's key. The other thing that I think we really need to take a hold of and start discussing within the industry is, does this take us back to a time that we fought really hard for Indigenous film not to be a genre, because it's going to be very easy for these VOD platforms to put us as a genre, and we fought very hard in this industry to move away from that. So I think we really need to start having that discussion amongst ourselves and work out what we're going to do in terms of that, and be very strong, because, for instance, you know, Three Wise Cousins that's playing tonight is very different from Chasing the Light. They are not a genre, we are not a genre. The other thing that I think is problematic for us is that this whole new world of VOD for distributors and for people that have VOD networks, such as us, is that it's very difficult to get data. We don't release data to distributors, filmmakers. And when it does come in, if it does come in, it's kind of in drips and drabs. So it's really hard to contextualise the audience. You know, what are people watching? How many people are watching it? How long did they watch it for? That for us as filmmakers is very problematic, because what happens then is a dialogue doesn't start. And when a dialogue doesn't start and journalists aren't talking about it and we aren't talking about it, it does a disservice to not only our industry and our films, but a lot of the time the issues that we're raising within Indigenous films are really important, and the reason why we've made films about it is because it hasn't been covered in history, especially from our voice and our angle. It's not covered in the news. So that's another concern I have for this world of VOD. But in saying that, I don't want to be bitter Betty. It is really exciting in terms of the freedom it's going to give our filmmakers. But I think we have to kind of be strong and tight and look at these issues and start addressing them now.
That's great. And Zach, is there anything you'd like to add on that from a CBC perspective?
Yeah. I think there are a few things that have sort of resonated with me as we've been going down the line. One of them is the idea of, sustaining an audience across multiple platforms over a long period of time, which I think, as a broadcaster, and that's been my background working at different broadcasters. I mean, that's always been the struggle on digital. If you work on a digital team and a broadcaster, you're given these massive projects that draw a huge audience for a very short period of time, that have a lot of marketing dollars put behind them. And then you wind up seeing, traffic results that peak and then dip and then peak and then dip, depending on the broadcast season. So, the one approach that you can take is trying to spread that out over as many platforms as possible, over as long as possible, so that you can keep that audience going and bridge them to the next big priority that you have on whatever channel you happen to be working on. But I think that the opportunity that we have now, and which I alluded to when I was introducing myself, is, we have these content verticals that will allow us to bridge that gap with original content. So I guess I just wanted to sort of circle back to that, because I think that's a big part of our approach right now, is saying what are people searching for? What are Canadians searching for? Of course, we're CBC, so what are Canadians searching for online, and what can we offer them that they might be interested in? So it really starts with the research and saying, okay, there's a place for a Canadian comedy destination of comedy made by Canadians. There's room for an arts destination and lifestyle and so on. And we can take our own approach to it, and it's building audiences around those audience interests. So anyway, so that's one thing that I just sort of wanted to comment on, and that's our approach to it, is just continuing to learn from that audience as they come in. Maybe they come in for something like 22 minutes or Hello Goodbye or one of our other big television shows, but what can we do to keep them there and keep them interested in what CBC is doing? So that's the one thing, and I think you just mentioned the idea of Indigenous as a genre, and I think we also would just think of Indigenous content as content that would fit within any of those areas. So is it arts content that is made by an Indigenous creator? Maybe, and then that would go over to the arts side, and the same would be true for comedy and so on. So I think we're looking for short docs from Indigenous storytellers right now until I think the end of October. If I'm getting nods, yeah, okay. So that's still open, and I mean that is part of our short doc strategy period, right? That's going to be part of that vertical, for lack of a better word, for CBC. So I think that's the way we approach it, and that's the way we approach discoverability too, is really putting things where people will expect them, and then hopefully creating familiarity with an audience, that they know that if they want a certain thing, they'll know where to go to get it, be it on different social platforms or on one of our sort of branded verticals. That again, what we're starting to refine those voices. What you should in time know what you're going to get when you go to CBC Arts from a voice perspective, and the same would be true for comedy and life and all the other areas. So yeah, that's my sort of general answer to that.
Great. Based on what we've just we talked about here with the two of you, seems that we're not really looking to brand 100% as Indigenous. That can be a hindrance, it would seem sometimes. We have to tell our stories, but we also have to highlight the universality of the experience of our people. Our people are people just like everybody else, and we all have commonalities. And when getting your product out there, as with Mohawk Girls, we reach out to sort of the universal experience of everybody. It's a series set in a native reserve, a modern native reserve with all the usual trappings and whatnot that goes on in there. But it's also a very small town. It's small town for everyone. Everybody can watch it and see a piece of themselves represented in that show. And it's really important when getting your content out there to highlight that as well. It's not just for Indigenous people. Indigenous people aren't the only people who will understand this. You will understand it too, because we're all people, I guess we'll just move on to it. Saj?
I'll just tap onto what you're saying. One of the ways that we viewed how consumption has changed now is that VOD is becoming prominent across studios. across any entity creating content. Now, VOD is that big challenge of transitioning from that theatrical being that main channel to being the focus of the online and the immediacy of it as well. That if you look at how people consume and consume content now as well, what your next challenge becomes is how do you then drive the exposure of your content? And you don't want to just market within that genre. You want to be able to put your content out in as many points of exposure as possible. That if you look at someone like me, I probably have 5 formats that I engage in a day, including a news channel, social media, etc. If I haven't been exposed to your content, the probability I'm going to a certain website is almost 0. So for us, it was a matter of addressing that if you look at how people consume content itself and being able to provide exposure to that content exponentially, increase that exponentially, then you increase the probability that people will engage with your content in the first place. Another side that we're seeing that's really becoming prominent from our technology that we didn't model it out was the cross-pollination. That from what I mean by that is that we, for example, we have a singer we're dealing with right now, and she's releasing content with one of the world's top sports teams. And if you look at the universe of that sports team's fans, probably 0 are her fans right now. As she's exposed in our vehicles with her social media, her other content, even if she gets a 0.25% traction rate from that fan base, it creates that exposure that she normally would not have gotten. For us, it's about looking at opportunities, whether it's themes, stories in the news, celebrity, brands that you can associate with to be able to attract their audiences and fan bases as well. So you can take advantage of that exposure as opposed to just trying to market towards indigenous channels of content itself.
Our television network comes at it from a different perspective insofar as we do not commission or create any content. We simply license the rights to transmit content from the content creators, from filmmakers like you. Just to give a little more detail, our brand is short films. So it is a schedule that consists of nothing but short films. So in many ways we have the same problem, because how do people discover us when it's not the kind of appointment viewing that a traditional network might have, where at 7:30 it's going to be a sitcom and at 8 p.m. it's going to be a procedural drama. So we have all of these short films, and our challenge is the same much as a filmmaker. How do we get discovered? And so what we've done as a promotional and strategic approach is to create tentpole events and then tentpole zones within our channel. And then we also, within that, will cross-purpose so that if there's, again, with the notion that you don't want to limit the branding or limit the genre. So if there's an indigenous film, that's a fantastic comedy. It will go both in our comedy zone, and then we'll do, as I say, tent poles, where we will do a special focus, whether it be a weekend or a month, on the films from First Nations and Indigenous people, and that will go out in a major promotional effort across all media in terms of trying to get coverage in print, coverage on radio, so that people can come to us. The other thing in terms of a branding perspective is we really do try and affiliate our brand with the best content in the short film genre. And that has been a great strategy, because people do come to us because they know that they're going to be able to see festival, best in fest type content. We also have been successful in creating compilations and doing theatrical releases with those compilations. The most notable is that we've been working with the Oscars, the Academy of Motion Pictures, to do a compilation of their 3 shorts categories. So a compilation of their live action, a compilation of their animation, and a compilation of the doc shorts, all of the nominees. And that has, I think, also elevated the genre of short films, because there was really no way that the general public could find them. So again, it becomes a question of being discovered. We are now in 600 theaters with those releases, and our expanding will be in Canada, Europe, South America, China. So that is giving a higher profile to, as I say, the genre of short films. with that, I think that allows, again, a greater discoverability. But again, for us, it's creating the tent pole events so that people who are fans of the genre have a better way to discover what we are curating. Because that's, at the end of the day, what a channel does. We're curating the best content possible. I think that there are opportunities also for filmmakers. I'm seeing it more brand down as opposed to filmmaker up. But there are brands that are making short films. And I suspect that the reverse could be true, where filmmakers could approach brands more from a social media, again, because what you're going to be able to do is offer that brand some authenticity to reach, you know, a viewer base that they might not have. An example is Lexus. Now, this is high end. I mean, but Lexus, they work with the Weinstein Company, and they release, I think, 6 short films annually. Well, we pick up those films. So, you know, if you can create a relationship like that, and then an alliance with a company like ours, you're guaranteed. You know, we do have some metrics in terms of our audience size and our household reach. So there is some accountability, because that often is the question: is that, okay, well, if I support your film, you know, as a brand, how do I know how many people are going to watch it? You know, so again, if there's that kind of affiliation, you would have the ability to provide some accountability, but also just with your own social media and fan base. I mean, that is a question when we are licensing. You know, how many Twitter followers do you have? How many Facebook fans? And it's not that that's going to be a make or break, but it really helps. I think, you know, as a strategic position, if you're a production company or a filmmaker, to start thinking that way, or thinking about how you cast it, because that becomes leverage too. What we'll do also, in addition to the channel business, we also act as a sales agent. We do have a catalog business. And our catalog business, again, acts as a sales agent. So we go globally across all platforms to market content on behalf of filmmakers. It's a 50-50 revenue share. But we have an output deal with iTunes and Amazon and other EST platforms. And that, again, is where, you know, casting and things like that can really make a difference, because if you can get the stars in your film to, you know, tweet and use their social media to say, hey, it's on iTunes, you know, it becomes, again, more discoverable. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing. It is, you know, an evolving process. We are starting to use Facebook much more, using, you know, putting our trailers on. We're asking our filmmakers to do sort of selfies, if you will, that are talking to why they made the film, what their inspirations were, and whatnot. And we'll put those kinds of things on Facebook. And again, it's just a cross-promotional effort to create more visibility and to you know, draw more viewers. I mean, at the end of the day, because we are a commercial channel, so, you know, we do need to pay attention to the marketing and to making sure that fan base is continuing and growing.
Thanks very much. All right, I think maybe now we should open it up to the floor a little bit. We've had a lot of ideas thrown out there, and I'm sure you have some ideas to throw out as well. Successes maybe you've had so far, things that are working for you, or any questions you'd like to ask anybody up here. Yes.
Oh, thanks. A few of you mentioned year-round engagement and kind of the creation of micro-content. And with that comes a bunch of questions, first in terms of sustainability, but also how do you not dilute the content of the work that you've done, because people might only see your micro-content and might not go to the actual full feature. So how do you reconcile kind of all of these, and how does it change the way that you produce content or that you conceive of your work before even starting filming?
Sorry. For us at Resolution Pictures with Mohawk Girls and for our newer projects, we're lucky enough to have some money. So we have money to throw behind that sort of thing. We hire a social media company, Innovate by Day, who you may have heard of here through the festival. They're Toronto-based, and they deal with a lot of digital media for a lot of Canadian television. They have been instrumental in helping us to keep our voice out there and going along, and helping us step by step to sort of evaluate and find out the steps we need to take and what we need to do. Having said that, if you don't have that kind of money behind your production, it's about picking and choosing and knowing your audience and what to create for them that will keep that engagement going. You don't necessarily have to bombard them 24/7 with your message, but a certain amount of engagement based on what you know about them, what they like about the show, what they like about your product, and then tailor that extra content to them. And like I said, it doesn't have to be all the time, but when you get it out there, they're waiting for it. They want to see that. They don't want to wait a whole season in between anymore to get additional storylines or maybe some kind of narrative that's connected to the overarching story, but we'll fill in some gaps that maybe would be really interesting. We currently, for season 4, are launching a little vignette featurettes that we're releasing in tandem with the broadcast, highlighting one of the secondary characters of the Mohawk Girls show, who's become very popular due to the comedic effect of his character. So he's very much a bro and a man's man, and doesn't have the best sort of advice or approach to life. But because of that, his constant stumbling around is very, very funny and very engaging to the audience. So we decided this season to highlight him a little bit more through the off content. He doesn't necessarily 100% line up with the overall message of the show, Mohawk Girls, but he's an extra little part we can throw in there that people really love, that's not going to dilute the message, not going to dilute the brand, but give those people a little bit more.
I have some thoughts on that too, if I could borrow Mike. Thank you. And I think going into it expecting the same level of engagement with, say, short form content that you would have gotten from a full episode is it's unlikely. So I mean, generally, at least in my experience, I don't usually expect that sort of thing. But I think that the type of content that you're talking about, and that type of, maybe a character study on one of the, non-main characters in an episode or something, just speaking in totally abstract terms, like things like that, or even behind the scenes material, or that sort of content, which often winds up being the sort of thing that you pull out of a show to try to extend its life online. I mean, I think that is the kind of stuff that will engage your super fans and the evangelists that will then become your biggest cheerleaders, and those people are crucial, and you have to keep them engaged. And I think, I think that's a huge part of why that sort of 52-week sort of engagement is a great idea if you can find a way to do it. Of course, that takes people and time and resources, and if you have them, that's great, and if you don't, then you might need to try to find a leaner way to do that without, say, original video. Maybe it becomes more of a social engagement campaign. But yeah, there are lots of ways to do it. But it just, if you are talking about a big sort of more expensive show, like a bigger production, and then the content around it, generally the show itself is the one that's going to really perform, and then everything else will be a fraction of that, and hopefully a bigger fraction. But it sort of, again, in my experience, it scales up and down. So I think that's been my experience with that sort of thing.
I'll add to that as well. We have a lot of kind of creative stakeholders in our project, because in New Zealand resources are very low. It's like the opposite, where there is no money for an ongoing, rollout of micro content. But because it's an animation, there's a lot of people who have to work on it for a long time, and they get invested. But it's quite a diverse group, obviously, because I come from a musical background. There's a lot of musicians who are doing the score with me, and so they want to see it do well. There's the animation team who have to live with that for a long time, so they're like, this better do well, And then there's obviously writers and producers, and we're all very different. We all have the kind of common vision that we want to see this kind of ascend and grow. But what we did is we ended up giving everybody access to that social media content and generating it on their terms, because, we'll have someone really young who just wants to release dank memes about it, and then we'll have someone else who wants to be really, conservative and say, please watch it at this time, it's on Māori television, And because there's multiple voices within the team, all kind of, producing and generating content across the different platforms too. Some of us are, just stick to Instagram. Some of us stick to Facebook. I was kind of doing a lot of the traditional media stuff when we did kick off as well. So it's always visible, but it's always kind of like it's a multitude of voices that are coming out. And I think that was because we don't have the resources to pay someone around the clock to do this really cyborg job. But we're a family, and we all want to see this art do well. So we are all, we're never short of content, We're always, someone's always saying something somewhere, because we made it like a real democratic kind of way in which to share. Yeah.
No. Are there any other questions?
Can I ask a question? I just want to ask a question, unless anyone else does. Okay, you can ask a question. Go ahead. Where's that microphone? Never mind. I won't.
Sorry to steal your thunder. Hopefully we have time for both questions. I'm a high school teacher, and I'm here with a really great group of young people doing sports and entertainment marketing who are your audience and also probably future content creators. I'm really interested in this idea. It's the first time I've heard about it, a second screen. And if you could tell us a little bit more about that, because, wow, that sounds like an incredible way. I think it probably puts a lot of pressure, and, both of you talked about limited budgets in New Zealand, and, just having your team just create what you do, but then this added pressure of creating this second screen content, but how that really can engage not just young people, but everyone. So could you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah, of course. As you did mention, it is it's not cheap. It's not easy. It's new. It's more expensive than to put it in context. Mohawk Girls as a vehicle has maybe 4 various marketing teams working on it from 4 different companies. We have the second screen experience people. We have Innovate by Day, who does the social media. We have APTN behind us as well with their publicity and promotion. And then we have our company, Resolution Pictures. So we do have a lot of resources. We do have almost the ability to do 24 hours around the clock coverage if we wanted to, which is amazing, amazing, amazing. The second screen experience is, like I said, very new. The statistics show now that over 60% of a younger demographic watch content on their television while also watching content on another screen, which is either your tablet, your phone, your laptop computer. And the second screen experience really allows them to be watching your content on both screens. So as they're being engaged by your television show, they're also being engaged through that second screen. And that second screen experience can be tailored to be basically whatever you need it to be. For us, it is a companion piece for the more super fans of the show who want to follow along. We offer things like real-time behind-the-scenes moments, vignettes of other continuation of the stories. Sometimes characters on screen will send a text, and there'll be a small text message conversation happening on the broadcast, but at the same time, you'll get the extended text conversation appearing on your second screen. Sometimes during right before a commercial break, we'll have a dramatic moment, a bit of a cliffhanger, which will be accompanied by a poll asking your opinion on how you think the situation should turn out. And then statistics popping in based on those results after everybody's voted. So it's great. You can really do whatever you want with that second screen experience to promote your content. You can sell things if you want while it's happening, while people are showing it on the screen. It really opens up the possibilities of what you can do and how you can engage your audience like exponentially. So for us, we're continuing forward with the next season of Mohawk Girls to do that as well. And you can access that through our broadcaster site on APTN, which is great. They've really thrown some clout behind that as well to make all of this happen. And we're, audience engagement has gone through the roof with this. So we're just climbing and climbing. So it's something that I highly recommend people take a look into, to whatever extent you can sort of afford to get yourself out there on a second screen. It's the future.
Yeah, just to back that up as a broadcaster, when I talk about the runaway train and how quickly it's all changed around. So one of our biggest commissions this year, which TX'd this month, was Shadow Trackers, which was a series and very much aimed at a younger audience. It's two young guys, one quite famous Indigenous actor, who go around looking at spirit and ghost stories. So that was commissioned 2 years ago. Before it went to TX, I had to go to the commissioning team and go, we need this second screen. So you're going to have to go and renegotiate this contract, because there's just no point us airing it without this extra content. So that's how quickly it's happened. We're actually having to go back and renegotiate contracts with commissions to make sure we have that content, because it's just such a great marketing tool and so required. And especially those younger audiences, they expect and need it now.
All right. Anybody else?
I have a question. I think maybe just to bring it to a level, like, what is a recommendation that each of you might have in terms of, people who may not be at that point where they've had a broadcast license, but maybe something that the emerging filmmaker can start thinking about with this project idea that they have in their head. What or who could they possibly connect to? Maybe it's fellow students who are good at social media, or it's like building a team, a free team right now. Maybe I'm answering my own question. What if, did any of you have any recommendations for, those emerging filmmakers, maybe as a closing point as to how to kind of get your stuff discoverable pre-broadcast, that kind of stuff?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a cliche, but think about your audience. Like, if you think your show is really great and you've got a really great story idea and you're getting a team together, it's who is actually going to watch it. To some extent, we talked about this sort of yesterday, is you need your audience to be organic, like when you're creating the story and your passion for the story. But also you need to be really purposeful about who you actually want to watch this, because if all you care about is you want to make it and you just want to watch it for yourself, that's great, awesome. But if you actually want to make it and you want people to watch it, really care about your audience and think about where they're going online, what else they're watching online, what they care about, discoverability is a great word, but it's really, really hard to kind of distill down into how you can have successful discoverability. It's almost like happen acrossability, where you want your audience to happen across, because someone mentioned like the chances of someone going to your exact website is pretty much zero. Nobody's going to happen to type in arohabridge.com. It's just not going to happen. So it's thinking about your audience and where they are, and I guess that would be sort of my tip, because once you have people watching your show and talking about it and really passionately engaging with it, broadcasters take notice. And I sort of, once we were online and having people watch the show, people were actually asking me, when is it going to be on Māori TV? And I was like, I should probably get in touch with them. And I did, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to broadcast it. And so it was like quite organic in that way. If you have people watching and caring about your show, then definitely broadcasters are going to want to have a look at it as well. And I guess that would be my tip, is really think and care about your audience, and not just hope that they're going to happen across it. And
I'll just absolutely backing that up. So know who your audience is, and be very specific. If you're developing something or if you're putting it to a broadcaster, give us specifics. I don't want someone to come with me and say, this is for 15 to 19-year-olds. be super specific. This is for 15 to 19-year-olds that come from a divorced family, that eat spaghetti on Friday night. Like, you really need to go, and give me a slot. Tell me when people are going to watch this. They're watching this. They're going to watch this at 7:30 on a Saturday night, or they're going to watch this at 9:30 on a Saturday night. Answer those questions for the broadcasters and the commissions, and they want to see that you've put that thought in, and they want to know. Create a persona if you need to, it's go into detail.
I would agree with that as well. I would say in the beginning stages of everything, engagement with the audience that you want. Talk to them about it. Reach out on social media. See what they think of your ideas. Bounce stuff off of these people who are actually going to be your audience, and find out what they want to hear from you based out of, your ideas. Especially in the early planning stages, everything can change. You can go in different directions, and find out what your audience really wants you to talk about.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. When I created Aroha Bridge, like I said, I'm always creating for who I was when I was younger, and the kind of archetypes and the things that I never saw. And it's just really crazy now that it's out, and I get comments from literally people who look exactly like me and talk exactly like me, and it's really freaky. It's like being in a time machine and just like meeting my younger selves. So I know that, it's really effective because it was tapered at this particular, stage of my life when I didn't have those kind of things available. And for me as a creator, it's basically producing the content on my terms for this particular idea, but then being able to compartmentalize that when we went for a release, and realizing that I had to stay true to the kind of consumption habits of that audience, which are basically based on convenience. Like when we put it up on Facebook kind of natively, it means that it just starts playing in your timeline, which, someone's not going to go to another website specifically for it. They literally just be like, show me what you got. I really don't have time for this, So it's basically putting really convenient media opportunities in front of the eyeballs, and just, as opposed to crossing your fingers. And then you see the results of that, the literally tailored audience that you had in your mind reacting and responding to it. It's really rewarding, but it definitely is like a duality. You create specifically, but then you kind of market and target and present it specifically as well. And they might not always be what you had in mind in terms of compatibility, but it ends up being quite effective.
You don't, just want to add one more thing, you don't necessarily as the creator have to be really good at articulating that. You can find somebody who can articulate it for you. So I worked with Jess on Aroha Bridge and with another producer, Kathy O'Neill, and it was sort of our job to take it to the people who fund us in New Zealand and say, we've got this really great vision, these really great stories, really engaging cast members on board, and it was our job to articulate how we were going to reach this audience. So, I've been a student myself, and, I've got this awesome story, but I don't really know how to tell people it's really awesome. And you can practice that. You can practice articulating who you want to watch this and how you're going to reach them. Or you can get a collaborator on board to articulate it for you. There are people who are amazing at that. So that would just be my last tip, really, is find collaborators who can articulate it for you if you've got really great artistic vision.
I would just say, branching off of that, I always find just on a practical level, a really useful exercise is thinking about the piece of content that you've made or that you're about to make, and once you understand your audience, who you're going for, what platforms they happen to be on, thinking about it in terms of what would someone say on Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and in one line, could they sum it up in a compelling enough way that would make you want to check it out? And if you can't quite get to that, then maybe it's not back to the drawing board, but what is it about this piece that I could maybe tweak to help it become that much more interesting to someone who stumbles upon it, to get them to check it out, because as we all know, it's just that much harder all the time to get stuff to rise to the top and cut through the clutter. So I think that's a simple and very worthwhile 5 minutes to spend on every piece of content that you're thinking about. How would people talk about this thing? What would a tweet look like, et cetera?
Yep.
Did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Again, because our company doesn't create original content and we don't necessarily have to go through that process, what we do is get exposed as an acquisition executive to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films. And so the kinds of things that I would say is first of all, as a filmmaker, as a content creator, leverage your relationships. You know, work with your colleagues, just create the content because it'll help hone your craft. As part of that process, I would urge every content creator to really look at their story and ask themselves if it's derivative or original, because you will never cut through the clutter if it's another derivative story. You have to have a hook. You have to have an angle. It has to be authentic. You have to have real dimensional characters with their own voices and a story arc with, as simple as this is, I can tell you many filmmakers forget it. You need a beginning, middle, and an end. A lot of short films are used by filmmakers as proof of concept for a feature film, and so oftentimes you're dropped in the middle of a story and it's not quite ended because they want to use that to get the funding. And I can understand that, but if your goal is to hone your craft, you know, really make sure that you've got an authentic characters that are telling a non-derivative story. And of course, I mean, I've heard that old adage, like there's only 7 stories in the world, you know, but there's got to be a way in that, again, will draw those tweets, will allow your film to rise above the clutter and the competition. The point of entry for filmmaking and content creating is now so affordable that it's just getting noisier and noisier, more and more difficult. So really work on your art and make sure that your art is as good as it can be. And if it's not, don't go to post and don't put it out there, because it's not going to elevate you or your colleagues. Just continue to work on it. And then as far as cutting through the clutter and visibility, the festival circuit is a very important way for at least our company to discover content. And I would suggest that you start exploring that world as a way to create more visibility for your vision, your films, your content. So that's from my perspective what I would suggest.
Great. Hello. There we go. Thank you very much. I guess that pretty much wraps up our panel for today. Thank you all for joining us here, and I hope everybody was able to take a little bit of something away from this that you can apply to your own projects and help to move you forward. Thanks very much, everyone.